Hi everybody, it's Billy. I've been off work ill today and I don't really feel up to coming into London and going back to Cambridgeshire again, so I've decided to do a screencast of my presentation to prove that I'm not skiving. So here we go. My paper was by this woman called Linard. The title of the paper is A Multi-Agent Simulation to Assess the Risk of Malaria Re-Emergence in Southern France. And so the purpose of the model, I took this text from the end of the paper because I quite liked it. The Malcam model provides a tool to better understand the interactions between agents that could be associated with a potential re-emergence of malaria in Camargue. Malcam is simply the name of the model, and that last text, Camargue, is a place in France. It's a wetland area in southern France which provides the ideal habitat for certain species of mosquito that is the host for malaria. So it's a single species of mosquito that can cause the re-emergence of malaria. And so the real purpose of the model is to simulate the sort of spatial and temporal variations of the contact rate between mosquitoes and humans. And the broader objective is to understand these factors that control the variations. And if you understand the factors, then you can understand the risk of re-emergence of malaria. So the phenomenon simulated within the model, the mosquito life cycle, human work and tourist behaviour, animal behaviour, land use, all of those occupying the same spatial and temporal domain. Now what does that mean? The mosquito life cycle is modelled from larva to growing up to adulthood, reproduction, and then it cycles through that. The human work and tourist behaviour, there are residents within the Camargue who live there and work there, and as well as that there's a tourist influx in the summer who have slightly different behaviour to the working population. The animal behaviour, mosquitoes are attracted by animals, and the animal behaviour is just completely random across the model. Land use, each cell represents a land use, and that might be vineyards, urban, or something else. But all of these occupy the same spatial and temporal domain, so they're all happening in the same place at the same time. And all of them make up this phenomenon of the interactions between mosquitoes and humans, which is what is being measured. So what they really need to get down to is there's mosquitoes in an area and there's humans, but how many humans are actually being bitten by mosquitoes? And this is what the model attempts to address. So there's two sort of broad types of agents. There's mobile agents and cells in this model. The mobile agents are humans or animals, and the cells represent rice fields, vineyards, marshes, urban or other. And you can see that mosquitoes aren't represented there, and the number of mosquitoes is actually aggregated to the cell. So each cell will have a figure for the number of adult mosquitoes within that cell. And one cell represents an area of 30 meters by 30 meters. So here we can see the diagram that I took that information from. The two broad agents, mobile agents and cells. You can see cells, like I said, made up of rice fields, vineyards, marshes, urban, and other. And the humans, the mobile agents made up of humans and animals. And humans are actually broken down further into rice grower, wine grower, hunter, inhabitant, and then tourist, which is broken down into camper and hotel tourist. And each of these have different factors which affect the potential for being bitten by mosquitoes. This table was also taken from the paper. It represents the parameters and variables. And what I really like about this paper is that everything that they've done, every sort of parameter they use or formula that they reference, it's all sort of taken from a valid source. So you can see here, going down the table, you know, things were taken from field study data or field surveys or expert judgment. And later in the paper, when they reference formulas, it's all based on academic work previously. And so it all builds into the trust of the model and sort of proves that it works. So the model behavior, it's really complex. There's many submodels within models, and it does reflect the intricate variable nature of the phenomenon, because there's many different things that can factor into whether someone will be bitten. So primarily the human and mosquito need to be in the same place at the same time. And then there's factors such as whether the mosquito is actually looking for a meal, or whether it's in its reproductive cycle. There's factors on the human, such as whether they're wearing, you know, mosquito spray, or what precautions they're taking to stop being bitten. So all of these sort of submodels make up the model behavior, and I'm not really prepared to talk about all of them because there's a lot of them, and it's very difficult to focus on more than one at once. You need to kind of understand one at a time. But the takeaway from this slide is that, you know, it's all sort of many different submodels making up this one sort of complex model, this overarching complex model, and interaction between human and mosquito, and whether there's an actual biting rate there. Time within this model. The model actually is between the months of May and October, because that represents the mosquito season, so mostly through the summer. And each time step is broken down into 3 different categories. So the first time step will represent from sunset until 1 hour after sunset, and this is when the mosquitoes are most active. And then the next time step will be 1 hour after sunset until 2 AM, where there are mosquitoes, but they're not quite as active. And then the final time step will be from 2 AM until sunrise, where they're sort of a little bit active, but there's less humans around. But you can see there's a gap between sunrise and sunset, and that's because they've modelled no mosquitoes active within that period, so therefore there would be no biting. So there's no point in actually modelling that period, and that's why. The platform and language that was used was NetLogo, which hopefully we're all starting to become familiar with. And the environment did use spatial data. This diagram was taken from the paper, and it displays that, you know, they took the rice fields as spatial data, and they took the urban areas as spatial data, and they've also modelled an actual campsite and an actual hotel. And if you can see the pixelated areas, they're the areas for where the actual biting rate was calculated. So this was the number of bites that were calculated within that cell. So yes, spatial data was used, and that's it. So calibration, verification, and validation. The model was calibrated against the field study data. So the field study measured how many mosquitoes were in a trapping area, and what was calibrated was the reproductive rate of the mosquitoes, and they calibrated it just right so that the number of mosquitoes in the model represented the number of mosquitoes in the field, and this was their step towards calibrating it. In terms of, I think sensitivity analysis is validation, but I may be wrong. They did do a sensitivity analysis, and it revealed that there was 2 sensitive parameters based on mortality and reproductive rates, and so it's a good thing that they calibrated the model, because reproductive rate was one of the most sensitive parameters, which could have thrown it up to 250% out with just the 20% inaccuracy. So without the calibration, the model could have been useless, effectively. And then so the final validation was sort of by proxy, because they used the abundance of mosquitoes within a cell as the validation parameter. But then that's not actually suggesting that there's any biting rates. If the validation could be done by the actual number of biting rate between mosquito and humans, it would indicate that the model is closer to real life. Because although this is a good validation, if there are mosquitoes in a cell, it's highly likely that if there's a human there, that they will get bitten. We don't actually know the rate that they will get bitten, how many bites they'll receive. That's assumed in this model. And in terms of verification, there weren't any formal mentions of it within the paper, but I think through all the field study work and all the references to academia, I think it is verified that this model does represent a good tool for measuring the interactions and the risk factors towards the re-emergence of malaria. So finally, the strengths and weaknesses. The first point, I think I've alluded to it a lot, that it's really good that everything that they've chosen to do within the model has been backed up. It's been referenced to academia, or they've done field studies to fill in the gaps. There's very little guesswork. The second point, the variables are flexible, and what that means is that you can run different scenarios in lab test conditions that are safe, because doing malaria tests out in the field is extremely dangerous. You could provoke the re-emergence of malaria, which would be a bad thing. But because there are so many flexible variables within this model, it makes it very good for testing, perhaps best case and worst case scenarios. The third point, which is a weakness, is the aggregation of the mosquito data to each cell. An improvement on the model would be if they could put each mosquito as a mobile agent rather than being confined to a 30 by 30 meter cell. But that needs a huge amount of computing power and maybe something for the future. The final weakness is the two sensitive parameters, which are mortality and reproduction rates. If the formulas can be modified slightly so that there isn't such a dependency on those two parameters, it would strengthen the model. I hope that people have understood that. It is very confusing, and I did find the model very complex, but hopefully I've sort of come across well. Once again, I'm sorry I can't be there. I'm very sorry to my group who I'm not working with tonight, but hopefully we can talk later. So thank you.